Hi everyone, I'm Sloan from SloanBella.com and I'm back with another channeled musical celebrity video. This one is on an incredibly iconic, completely unique, freedom-seeking, electric singing sensation whose face marked the movement of the 1960s and 70s all the way through to headlining at Woodstock without her knowledge. Who could I be talking about? You know who I'm talking about. The beautiful, incredibly talented, and amazingly individualistic Janis Joplin. I was super excited to get this information, and I won't lie, I know a lot about Janis Joplin, as in I know who she is and I love her music, and what more do you need to know? I found it so interesting when I was able to tap into her energy because the uniqueness of the way that she thought is something that hasn't actually been portrayed or something I haven't heard about. So I asked her, as I tried to remain as neutral as I could, to explain what it felt like to be her in this life. First of all, I had to look at her chart. As you know, I have to do that. So I looked at her chart. She was born on January 19th, 1943. That would make her 77 right now. Can you imagine? 77 years old. I wonder what she'd be like. She'd probably be making moonshine somewhere and pretty cool. That's what I think. I can see the moonshine thing with her. Anyway, I looked at her chart. She had a lot of retrograde planets, but what I found most interesting was the fact that she was a Capricorn sun, last degrees of Capricorn sun, okay, very last degrees, and she was a Cancer moon, and then I understood intrinsically what her thinking pattern was like, at least on an emotional level. She was an Aquarius rising, and I think when I think of Janis Joplin, I see the Aquarius in her personality. I see it. That's the uniqueness. That's the rawness, the quirkiness, the sunglasses, the feathers in her hair. That is Aquarius rising, if ever I saw it. They kind of march to the beat of their own drums. So that's Aquarius. The Capricorn wouldn't necessarily do that, but mixed with the Aquarius, we got somebody who's completely professional at what she does, and then we've got a very unique personality. What throws it all off guard is the Cancer moon. So immediately you go to an early childhood emotional rejection from the mother. So Cancer moon is good on a whole, but for the person who has the Cancer moon, there's an instinctual feeling of not bonding or connecting. Now, I noticed some other things. She is a singer that was born with Mercury retrograde. So in truth, the pursuit of her soul path was a spiritual pursuit, not necessarily a monetary pursuit, although she was working her way up to that, obviously. But I don't really think she cared about that exactly. She had Mercury retrograde in the 12th house. She also had her South Node on the ascendant from the 12th house, direct do-over from a past life. She had Venus in the 12th house, many, many hidden love affairs. Remember, Venus in the 12th house is karmic past life lovers, love affairs, hidden love affairs, secret love affairs, all kinds of love affairs are in the 12th house. She had that kind of a love life. So I started to tap into her energy. And the first thing that I got, I instinctually, oh, I forgot to mention this. She had Uranus and Saturn, both of them retrograde. Uranus on the 4th house cusp, okay? And Saturn in the 4th house. So she had both of those things going backwards in her birth chart. I found that really interesting because the Saturn retrograde would have been the emotional disconnect from the father. I'm sure her parents tried to raise her in the way that they could. But what's so interesting is the most recent past life, she literally shot into this life from that life and had no idea. The singing talent with her was the intercepts in the 1st house from Pisces and then opposing Virgo house. So she really focused on the Piscean aspect of her personality, and I noticed that as well, the Aquarius rising, but the drug addiction that they apparently said she had would have been very Pisces, and the over sensitivity to the environment and the world. Now, she gets a bad rap for a lot of things. This is what she tells me. She doesn't even mention the fact that she's the singer that she is. What she says is that it didn't come easy to her. She had a certain sense of power and a certain sense of strength, And her strength was what pissed people off. This is how she feels. She was very, very, okay, how do I want to word this? There was exactly a split personality with her. One side of her personality was extremely strong, and she knew what she wanted and she knew what she needed. And the other side of her was completely absorbent and empathic. And that was a problem for her, because she would be strong over here and she would have been very, very bending to the will of others over here. And this is where she got into trouble. She was so in tune with people in her environment that early on in her life, it caused her a problem. Very connected to her mother, and also very rejected by the mother. And she talks about being probably in the first part of her life, so from 0 to 8 or 10 years old, and being quite happy, noticing things, being quite enjoyable with things, watching her life move in a direction that was actually really cool and really happy. She felt a lot of happiness and joy, and she tells me when she was very young, she never took notice of who she was. In other words, she never stopped to look at herself in the mirror. She never really stopped to pay attention to what other people look like. So she describes very early on, 6, 7, 8, being relatively not grounded in the physical body, but being aware of the physical body. So she talks about just really not focusing on the physical. Like, she did the things that kids do. She played, she went outside. She loved to sing, okay? She loved to do that. That was just a drive for her. It was an immediate drive. And by the way, it came from her most recent past life. Something about her most recent past life, she was also a singer. She was a singer from a different generation, and for some reason, she never made it in that generation. In other words, this is what she was telling me. She was saying that, and she was a totally different looking person. I think what I'm seeing is I feel the reason she was so drawn to black singers and the blues and that kind of music at the time was because she came from that in a past life. I also feel, and she told me this, that she died with a desire line. So she felt, this is just from what I can gather, she felt that the reason she wasn't able to be successful in the most recent last life was because of the way that she was born. So I'm taking that to mean that she was female and her skin color and all of these things. She felt like this hindered her in that lifetime. She immediately came back through into this lifetime, exact opposite. Now she's a white woman. Now she's back there. Now she's given her singing gift again. Her gift came from the most recent lifetime. She's saying you've got to be really careful not to cross out of the earth's energy as your human self into the death or altered state of death. She calls it an altered state of death, which is interesting. But she says to be careful because you will come back and you will repeat that. And she's kind of like shaking her head like this, like she repeated it and there was really no need to, but something about her soul was like, I didn't get to do this. So she came back to do it. Like, she literally jumped right back in and was Janis Joplin. Before, I'm not sure who she'd been because I believe it was an unknown singer. It's not anybody that was famous, but she was trying to get to that level of success and was unable to do it. So it's really interesting that she went from over here to over here. Now, she came back as Janis Joplin. She wasn't really aware of who she was in her body. Like, she didn't stand in the mirror and go, I'm a girl, I'm a guy, I'm this height, I have this color hair. She kind of just was enjoying herself. She was very disconnected. She talks about, she actually talks about being spiritually connected very young. So she talks about being able to connect with the other side and kind of just blindly move through her life. So if it made her feel good, she did it. This is what she did. She was very sad and very scared. Now, this is kind of interesting. The pattern repeated itself with her mother and her siblings being born. From the most recent past life, she was born into a huge family where she felt, again, like she was left out. I guess if you have like 8 or 10 kids, you're like, you don't have time to nurture every single one. I mean, that would be a lot of kids, right? So she was born into this life with less kids, but she still felt the disconnect from her mother. And she's basically saying that she had a very hard time accepting love. She didn't trust it. from very early on. There was something very strange about her dad, and he always looked at her like he didn't approve of her. Her mother, she describes as being somebody who followed what the father said. So the mother tried to cater to her, but it's almost like Janis was scapegoated in the family as being the crazy one, or scapegoated as being the problem. She was tricky. She was very smart, and she was tricky. How she shows me her trickiness, she's tricky. She would cause little problems between her parents when she was younger, and it got them into arguments. She was smart that way. Very quirky, very unique, very odd, very afraid of being left alone. The relationship with her mother caused her great distress. Problems. Her mother looked at her almost like she, I'm going to use the word disapproved of her, but that came from the father. The father was a huge source of disconnect in the family. The father had a vision one way, the mother had a vision a different way. And it's like Janis got caught up and was kind of thrown out there as if she was the problem. So in order to distract from the parents looking at each other, it was Janis that was focused on. So it was kind of unfair to her, but she was scapegoated. Now, she talks about her soul learning strength in this life. So a lot of what she experienced was so that she could learn strength, so that she could focus on being strong and an individual and accepting herself and being able to love herself in this life. She was not able to love herself in the most recent past life, but this life she wanted to be able to love herself. That's what she focused on. She focused on that in a way that made her stronger, made her very intense, and made her want to keep pushing forward. Now, she talks about early on being visited by what she calls now her guides and teachers from the other side. And she had a woman that sat down with her. Oh my God, this woman in the past life was in her life, but had crossed over, stayed on the other side. And this woman sat with her and kind of showed her how she was to create her music. So the reason she was so ahead of her time was because she was given the information in which she had from her past life in this life, and she was able to perform. She talks about being sexual very early on. And I mean, I think that this caused a problem with her family. She's about 8 or 9 and she figured out how to be sexual. Don't ask me how or why. I'm not going there. This seems like just natural exploration for the soul. Just like she came back into the body. She was very young and she realized and recognized that she was a sexual being. So she's talking about being very sexually focused early on, at least with herself, whatever that means. I know you know what that means. Her parents kind of pushed her away with this. So her parents were intrusive on her energy. And there was a lot of things that went on behind the scenes where she was judged for things that she did. But it's almost like she was born and she was a little adult. And so she was very aware of these things, she wasn't aware of her body. And then she became completely aware of her body in a sexual aspect. There were elements of sexual addiction with her, or sexual promiscuity in order to gain connection, but it was never enough, is what she talks about. It was never enough for her. No matter who she connected with, there was still a feeling of aloneness. And when she asks, because I asked her what she died of, which I know what they say in the reports, but I asked her what she died of, she told me she died of loneliness. That's what she said. So she told me she died of loneliness. She told me about the drugs, and I'll tell you something. She started the drugs a lot earlier on than she let on. She started them in her late teens. She started experimenting with drugs. She felt it brutal to look at people and feel the way that they felt about her. She took very personally other people's projections onto her personality. Very empathic, very sensitive, very creative. And get a load of this. For all the drug taking she did and all the alcohol and all of this and all of that, she was very focused on her work and worked very hard. So this was not a woman who was fucking around, not able to perform. Those are stories. She talks about being completely afraid of being found out and not good enough. So she had a real sense of perfectionism, and she constantly tried to pursue that. Like, she constantly tried to be perfect, consummate professional, study her work, study everything, practice. She practiced all the time. She wasn't flippant. She didn't walk onto stage and just go, oh, okay, now I'm just going to perform because I'm here and you guys bought tickets. She actually really studied, and she was working on different stuff at the time of her death. She talks about getting sucked into the drug lifestyle, and this is what she's telling me. Okay, so when she was in her late teens and she was doing the normal stuff and her parents thought she was normal, well, they thought she was odd, but they thought she was normal. She was doing all of these things. She was sneaking off and she was kind of doing hookups with people. And it's during one of these experiences that she learned how to do drugs. She let somebody do this to her, and it was something that just really took. She talks about that. She talks about the energy and spirit inside of the drugs that she did, and I'm assuming she's meaning something that she shot up. I'm unclear as to what it is. She's shaking her head yes, but I don't know if it's heroin, speed, meth. I don't know if they had meth back then. I don't know what it is, but she's talking about the spirit of the drug getting in her, the spirit of the drug. She shows me the drugs around her and just the energy and the combination of it, but she did it so that she could connect with this person. She had a hard time accepting love, but she wanted to give love. So she did the drugs with this person as a way literally of connecting with them. Okay, she describes her first drug experience as taking her right out of her body and getting rid of everything around her so that she could finally see. And she talks about all the spirits that came to her while she was doing drugs. She talks about this. She talks about the way it made her feel, the effect it had on her. And this was something she snuck off to do. I think she was around 17. This is how she looks to me. It wasn't like when she became famous. She was doing this probably towards the end of high school, early college. This is what she was doing. She was sneaking off and doing stuff like this. Like, she literally was doing drugs at that time. And I'm talking shooting up. This was no joke. Wishes she'd never done it, but she talks about doing drugs the first time as being a very sexual experience for her. And I know that sounds weird, but giving herself to this guy, she really liked this guy. A few years older than her, and I see him. He looks a lot different than her. Kind of looks like, well, she looks one way, but he doesn't look like he would match her. And he was somebody who was very well liked, very well known, and she was very connected to him. She ran into him. She used to sneak out at night all the time and go do these grown-up things, like sneak into bars, sneak here, sneak there. She ran into him, and the way that she did the drugs was, she's describing it as a very sexual thing. So she gave herself to him by allowing him to shoot her up, is how this feels. She wished she hadn't, but that is what happened. Now, her Cancer moon, I can see this. I can see the sex addiction or the sexual reference with that. That's where my mind went, right, when I was feeling that energy. But she's talking about it, and she didn't want anyone to know, and it gave her a sense of power, she thought, all right? It gave her a sense of power. She didn't feel like she had much power, but yet she had a lot of power. But she was so insecure about her power. See, I think what happened to her is I think that she presented herself in such a uniquely talented way. And on this planet, let's face it, we all like people. We all got to fit in. We all got to do the same thing. If your neighbor has this, you want that. You want to have 2.3 kids. You want to, go to the best church, drive the best car, do this. She wasn't like that. She was so individual that it frightened people. And she came at it from a very interesting point. She also talks about having OCD. Part of the drug issue was an OCD thing with her, very repetitive. It quietened her mind to think about, where am I going to get the drugs? What am I going to do? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do my music? So it was kind of like an OCD thing with her, or the repetitive thinking, a loop in her head is how she describes it. But she was so unique, and she was so afraid of being found out in a lot of ways that she was overly focused on her work and creating her sound and practicing it and being very good. And she talks about these interviews. She's so funny. She talks about these interviews, going on stage and being interviewed by people and talking to these people that wanted to know about her and basically saying like it was so uncomfortable for her because she really wanted to be herself, but she was constantly told she needed to rein it in so she could only half be quirky. And she was quirky. Oh God. And she followed, she's showing me this too. She did a lot of spiritual practices too. She followed some kind of, she's just telling me right now, some kind of Indian, philosophy that took her out of her body too. She did a lot of that at the same time. So she followed many different theologies as far as what she wanted to do. And then she got roped into everything. And she's talking about, again, the sex. I don't know what's up with this, but she's talking about her relationships. And she's saying that she literally was with people who she felt a connection to, people who she could connect to. And the reason that she enjoyed connecting with, strangers, we'll just say people that she didn't know so well, was because she could connect with them and be herself and then go away, where it wouldn't be, it's almost like she's saying it wouldn't be used against her. So she enjoyed the transiency of the connections. She did sleep with both men and women. She didn't have a problem with that. She feels later on in life she would have ended up with a man. Something about a man, if she could have settled with one and not gotten into arguments with them. She was very, very free and very, very controlling. So she's like a split personality here. Part of her was like manipulative, to manipulate the energy to her of both male and female. And she did enjoy both. It wasn't just one or the other. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm high, I'll go sleep with a man, but I really like women, or, oh, I really like women and I'm not going to sleep with a man. It was both for her. She literally was both, but it was more of a connection thing rather than, quote, a sexual thing. Like, it wasn't like, oh, that turns me on, I'm going to do it. It was more along the lines of, I need to connect and this person's energy resonates with me, so I'm going to connect with them. She did a lot. She was very promiscuous, very promiscuous. She talks about the drinking. The drinking that she did was basically to set up a personality for herself. She didn't know how else to be, and she needed to be seen as, she's talking about being seen as one of the guys. So wherever she got her persona from, it was for her to be one of the guys. She wasn't actually unfeminine. She was pretty feminine. I mean, she would be very feminine and loving, but she was argumentative at the same time. So I think what I'm seeing here, what I'm feeling, is somebody who is completely empathic, has been scapegoated in childhood and is punching back with people because she doesn't know how to respond to them. This is what I think I'm feeling. She talks about her musical history, talking about the past life coming into this life and expressing herself. She had such fun when she was on stage. She talks about it as being, I don't want to use the word sexual again, but she talks about it as being sexual. It was like orgasmic to her. She was able to disconnect from the physical. When she was really in herself, she literally could disconnect from her physical body. And that is something that she loved. She loved the feeling of like leaving the body, which she did quite often. She was quite good at it, and that was part of the drug thing. The drug thing took her, she talks about going on ancient adventures every time she took drugs. Like, she may have been sitting here and she may have been high and she may have been this, but she was a controlled addict. That's a very weird thing to say. She was, because she died apparently from a drug overdose, and I'm going to get to that. I have not asked her that yet. I want her to come through like literally now and make me feel what it was. But she talks about being a controlled addict. She wasn't as out of control as they said. She was as lonely as people said, but not as out of control. She was, okay, here's what she says about her death. She talks about the disappointment in her life. She was not prepared to die at that time. That was not something she wanted to do. She's talking about being forced into the drugs at that time. Okay, here's what she's saying. At the time, probably for 4 months before she died, I don't know what happened then. I was just little. I don't even know when she died. When did she die? 1970s, I think. I think she died, I know it was in September, I think. I've got to look it up. I just forgot. It went out of my head. 27, so 43 plus 27. Yeah, probably 1970. I can't even add. But she's talking about 4 months before she passed away. She's talking about a lot of struggle. She wanted to change She wanted to change the way that she traveled. She wanted to take up these other things. She wanted to write. Now she's talking about writing, but I don't think she's talking about writing music. I think she actually wanted to start writing something. Writing she wrote a lot, wrote. I almost feel like she channeled writing. Automatic writing and channeled energy. She wrote a lot. She focused a lot. She focused on so many different things. 4 months before she passed away, she wanted to go into seclusion. I don't know what happened. I feel like she was under contract. I feel like she was supposed to do a series of events. She wanted to go off over here. Something about her wanted to settle down. I know that sounds really weird. I feel like she might have wanted to start a family, or thought she wanted to start a family. I mean, once you start thinking about it, you're a young woman, you're 27, energetically you can do that. You don't have to do it right then. But I feel like she wanted to do this. She's kind of talking about, she's showing me an area of the country that's very secluded. It's not like Los Angeles. It's not New York. It's very different. She's showing me a piece of property. She's showing me a house. She wanted to go do this. She wanted to go into the spiritual realm. She wanted to have a studio. She wanted to have her lover. She's talking about, it's funny. I don't know and have not read, don't even know if he talked about it, but I think she's referring to Kris Kristofferson, whom I know she dated, who I know wrote her music on the last albums that she, Full Tilt Boogie. I feel like she wanted to settle down with him. For some reason, I don't feel he wanted to settle down with her. I feel like they were conflicted and yet they loved each other. And I'm not sure exactly how or why that went, but I feel like she wanted to settle down. This is what I feel. I feel like she literally wanted to go off over here. She's showing me this place, and I almost get the feeling that it was like a experimental kind of musical drug kind of a place. She wanted to open it up to people, and she kind of just wanted to explore. I'm going to go out on a weird limb here and say I almost feel like she wanted to open up her own commune or her own place. I don't feel like she wanted to keep traveling. She didn't understand what these people were doing to her. She had no idea of her actual strength. No idea, okay? No idea. She's kind of flipping papers up like this, and she's showing me a drawing board, and she had all these ideas, just these ideas coming through. And they were for herself and her life, and she wanted to do this, but they wanted her to stay here, but she didn't want to stay here. And 4 months before is when she put her foot down. I put my foot down. I'm not doing this. I want to go over here. I don't feel well. I need to get better, but I want to explore things. And I think she was going kind of in a little bit of a psychic way. Now, here's the other thing that comes in. She's talking about being forced to sign documents, and I have no idea what this means. She's being forced to sign documents. She had no idea she was going to die, even though she signed these documents, is what she's saying. No idea whatsoever. And I'm going to tell you something right now. I'm going to sound like a lunatic because a heroin addict, they always OD. I know what we think. We've all known a drug addict that dies. Okay, here's what I'm going to say. I feel energetically, okay, how I'm seeing this. She's showing me how she died. Okay, so let me get this. I didn't ask her prior to this, but this is what she's showing me. Okay, so she doesn't really want to do drugs that night, and she calls somebody. I can hear her on the phone. She's talking to somebody. A girl answers the phone. A guy gets on the phone. The guy won't give her the drugs. They're arguing about this. Okay, I have a feeling that she wasn't supposed to be taking them. Well, you're not supposed to, but I literally feel whoever this person was, he didn't want to give her the drugs. The girl answered first, or he was with his girlfriend and couldn't be bothered to give her drugs, which doesn't really sound like a drug dealer, but he's saying, I'm not going to do this. Call me in the morning. You're going to be okay. This, that, and the other. So I'm looking, and she's in the hotel or motel, whichever it was. She's there, and she's like, fuck. Like, I can see it. She's disappointed. Part of her knows she shouldn't do this. She calls somebody else. This is another guy. This guy says, well, I can't do this, but I'm going to send over somebody else. So she asks some questions, and I feel like somebody she doesn't know, tall, dark-haired guy, comes to the door. When I see the guy, she answers the door. What she's looking for, and I'm going to say this. Okay, so the guy that comes in the door young, well, maybe a few years younger than her, or looks younger than her, comes to the door, tall, dark-haired, kind of very similar looking, sideburns, wavy brown hair, brown eyes, very nondescript, cute, but nondescript. Okay. Do you see this? Do you see how it's going? Okay, you just saw the camera go out of focus, so I had to stop and focus. Anyway, the guy is brown-haired, wavy-haired, brown eyes, pretty nondescript, cute but nondescript. Looks a bit younger than her. Shows up at the door. He's got a bunch of stuff in his pocket. Okay, so he pulls this stuff out for her. To me, what it looks like is it actually looks like hash in a bag, but I think it might be some kind of heroin. So some kind of dark heroin is what I think. It does not look white. It looks black, and it looks like hash to me. This is what I see. I don't even know what that is, but that's what it looks like to me. She goes over to get a drink somewhere. She goes over to the right. So the door is here. She goes over to the right. It's like by a sink. She goes over by the sink. She goes over to the right. There's a window over there. She's looking around. She does notice people outside the window. And at that moment, she's thinking to herself, something's not right here. This is what she's thinking. But then the lure of the drugs is there. And the way that I'm seeing this, and I'm going to say this to you, I actually feel like this was some kind of an energetic hit. That sounds weird, and I apologize for that, but I feel like this was some kind of an energetic hit. The guy walks in the room, and immediately I get like coldness. Now, if she'd have been paying attention or not focused in an emotional way, she might have literally got up and left the room because she would have felt this. But I am getting literally like an emotional connection to the guy when he walked in the room, but it's like the guy has bodyguards around him. These are energetic things, and they're around him, and I see them surround her energy. I don't know if she's actually aware of this in a physical sense. I just see them surround her. And when I look at it, what I see is I see her, okay, whatever is in this bag of the brown solid thing that actually looks like hash to me, or some kind of sticky wet brick thing in a bag. I do see her start to shoot up, but she is like smoking a joint. She is having a drink. I see her, they moved her, somebody moved her actually when they found her. She just wasn't dead. She did not what they said. She's showing me somebody was there when she died. I feel like whatever it was, there was something that stopped her body from moving. So we know when you overdose, you lose your breath, you lose your heart. We know this. This is not what I'm talking about. This is like some kind of paralytic in it, some kind of medicine, some kind of something that just literally made her stop being able to move. She couldn't move. So I can see this with her, and I'm like, what is this? She was like looking, she immediately, this is what she shows me. Okay, so I feel, I almost want to say she had a fold-out bed. I don't know. I want to say in the hotel room there was a fold-out bed. For some reason, I feel like she's sitting on a couch and then it becomes a bed. Either way, I see her with her, she pulls back immediately when she feels this out of her body, and I see her with her knees up under her chest and her arms around her like this, and she's actually looking around the room like, what the fuck just happened? So she can't get back in her body, and she describes people on an energy level around her physical body, and they're basically like not guarding her body so she can't get back in. Literally, so she can't get back in. This is terrifying to her. She's focused on like, why can't I get back in my body? Okay, she's talking about not being able to get back in her body. She's talking about these three energies like guards around her body, and she can't get back in. She's showing me the cord that connects her etheric body to her physical body. One of the guys, and she describes him, and this is even weirder, she describes him as having a bald shaved head. I'm talking energetically. This is nobody that was in the room, and nobody, I don't even know that the guy that brought the drugs to her is aware of this. Maybe they're just attached to him. I don't know. But she's describing the guy with a shaved head, like a big guy, and she's showing me the cord, and it's still attached to her body. She's pulled back out of her body and is leaning up against the headboard or leaning up against the wall. She is literally pulled back, And she's saying that she sees the cord and she starts to move forward to the cord in her body, and it's cut by the guy. It's literally cut. And she's dead. She's immediately sucked out of the room after that. She's describing it, and I can hear her screaming, no. So she was very well aware that she wasn't supposed to buy this. She's very well aware that she was not supposed to die. This woman was not supposed to die at that time. There was something in the drug that was like a paralytic, and there was one person in the room with her when she died. The body was rearranged after that, and yeah, she wasn't supposed to die with this. This wasn't supposed to happen this way. Actually, she would have been quite amazing had she lived, but this wasn't supposed to happen this way. They literally took her out of her karma. I don't know what I'm talking about though, if I'm talking about like this person set her up, but it was, okay, I'm going to word it this way. The guy that brought her the drugs, the first guy that said no drugs, the second guy, and then the third guy that showed up. So whoever they called, the third guy that showed up, he literally was somebody that brought with him energetic beings that were in control of the situation, and she was locked out of her body. She was basically shut down. So she was shut down. Not a good time, not a good time at all. And she was in the process of changing things. So they shut it down right there. And I almost have a feeling that the guy that went into the hotel room, he may have had these entities attached to him, or these spirits attached to him, or somebody may have projected them onto him to get their work done. Because then I go all the way back to a lawyer's office who I think she called a couple of days before she died, or the week before, or 2 weeks before, but some crazy close amount of time. And I feel like there was a plan to this. It was systematic. I feel like I'm seeing somebody benefit from this, and I'm seeing a phone call that she's dead before it was released. So I feel like it was a setup. I feel like this particular drug, they knew it was going to set her up, or somebody switched drug. This is what I feel. It's very odd, but that is what I feel, and this is what I've gotten on her right now. This is my first video on Janis Joplin, and I will be back with more. And once again, my name is Sloan from SloanBella.com.